synthesize 30 questions into 3 or 4 in 15 minutes, then the newest hourglass board member, nationally recognized nonprofit leader, recently retired executive director of our United Way, our panel moderator, Susan Eckert. And have at it, Susan, and good luck, panel.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the panelists. You were inspiring. You were filled with humor, music, I must say. I did notice in your bios that you were all trained as teachers. And there was a question from the audience in particular about teacher training. So what's your recommendation on how to both train new teachers and potentially retrain current teachers in this new environment?
I was a professor in college ed for a while. I can jump in there. The moving target has never been more applicable than right now. We are educating, we have to educate teachers for capacity, not particular skill sets. We traditionally train people, hey, teacher, before you leave, you have to know how to use a mimeograph. You have to know how to set a tab in Word, or use a spreadsheet. We have to instead start to educate our teachers for a capacity, digital literacy, that they can be fluent in anything, whatever comes down to it, and be aware of this information scarcity model being deconstructed. There's a lot that has to change in the fundamental way we educate our educators. And in retrospect, a lot of professional development has to occur to our existing educators. And one thing is that we have the skill sets in America to make this work. We really have fabulous teachers. It's just a matter of providing them some leeway in terms of regulations to allow some of that innovation to occur. That's where I would start.
So that's a good point too. I think something to consider also is we have sort of this old school concept that you go to college, you have a skill set, and that skill set is going to carry you through for 20, 30 years. And we have to completely abandon that. I mean, think about what we do in terms of on-the-job training, how we are continuously having our employees update their skills. So this is a really critical question because it's ultimately a human resources question. Because really, fundamentally, we know the teacher is the most important commodity that we have. And again, it's just making sure we have that emphasis of that ongoing training.
And the ongoing training, very laser focused on what they need when they need it.
Yes.
We've spent a whole bunch of money in this country on professional development. It might be a class on a Saturday or an service day or in the summer or whatever. And there's a certain amount of, I love the profession and I want to learn these things, so that's really helpful. But if the kinds of things that we want teachers to leverage to impact what they're doing every single day, somehow we have to get in the classroom. I've had this notion about, putting a little, some device or something with teachers and have them, it beeps every, 30 minutes for a week. And you say, what do you need to know right now? And we can analyze the heck out of actually what people need to know and what would help them get better, sort of in 30-minute increments. If we did that enough times, we'd have a lot of data, and we can have a much better idea about how teachers are working. It's interesting, teachers who are working in kind of technology immersive environments, so say all their students have some sort of device. The one kind of consistent thing I hear from these teachers is they basically say, all day long, I'm rethinking everything I'm doing. Like, all the time, it's like, oh, I could do this way, or, hadn't considered this other way, or whatever. And so it's this notion of continuously, kind of rethinking how they're interacting with what they're doing.
And a question that we get all the time in our district, and I know lots of teachers ask, is where do I start? Because everything we talk about tonight can be absolutely abjectly overwhelming because there are so many different tools, so many different techniques. And I think, too, we have to develop with our teachers sort of this concept of specialization. Pick one or two items that you're really good at, one or two tools, and just exploit those tools. So again, it's just picking something and developing a specialization around that.
How about the balance between relationship, as you were describing, John, and specialization, or the sort of old view of delivering content? I have to tell you, I was cast back to those days when I was a chemistry major, of all things, and having to memorize the periodic table. But today, it's a different world. How do you balance the issue of relationship building with content expectations?
The most important thing we have is is that relationship. The problem is that the current system, which is arisen out of good intentions. I mean, the standardized testing movement that we all love to complain about has a really good motivation in its inception, which is to provide some accountability and provide education, the framework that it needs to start self-reflecting and moving forward in growth. There also has to be some, and as you were talking about, the ultimate evolution of having, immediate feedback all the time. It doesn't have to be these high stakes days, which are currently going on right now in Pennsylvania. The relationship is absolutely key to understanding the content. If you don't know the context your kids are coming from and going to, the content becomes completely irrelevant. We continue to treat school as an Easter egg hunt. Like, I will tell you stuff as the teacher, and you try and figure out what the most important parts are. And then I'll give you an assessment where you tell me those important parts back, and then I give you your grade to get your A or B. And it really shouldn't be, we treat note-taking as like the ultimate skill. We should be, our teachers should be taking the notes for the students, telling them these are the most germane points, and then helping them really, it's not what the knowledge is, but what they do with it. These relationships so we can build assessments that are really critical thinking, higher level problem solving all the time, and getting away from the rote things being a barrier to accessing these concepts.
Yeah, just one interesting note I was thinking about. One of the things that, again, back to professional development, how we can kind of interact with teachers, one of the things I think that we can spend a lot of time rethinking our assignments, right? So it's like rethinking the assignment. So it was, you do 1 through 30 and then come back tomorrow and go grade your paper and kind of try to re-explain the things you missed or whatever. You can rethink the assignments because we have access to these tools, because we have access to explanations. So we can engage students in a whole different world of very challenging and involving relevant problems. And we can do so within the context or build in the context of learning the kinds of content and skills. It would be a point where everybody doesn't need exactly the same content. This is kind of where the personalization comes in, but they're all learning content that's relevant for solving a complex problem. So getting teachers engaged in rethinking assignments and coming up with different kinds of assignments now that their students have access to these tools is going to be a really important
There's
part.
a jump on that as an example I just saw, which blew my mind. It really has very little to do with technology other than the access point. Civil War, 8th grade, learning about the Civil War. And the traditional thing would be we learn all the facts of the Civil War and then I have some essay questions where the kids have to tell me about the Civil War back. This assignment is very simple. There was no lectures, no content delivered in class about the Civil War. This teacher had identified some resources. Here's a video, here's some text, here's a textbook, here's an audio file, all these different ways you can learn. Go do that on your own. Every kid had to write, it started off as a one-page paper. You have to write a simple one-page paper about how the causes of the Revolutionary War and the conclusion facts of the Revolutionary War relate to your personal world. Tell me a parallel. It started off as a one-page paper, and this was meant to be a 3-day assignment. And they worked on it in class. Teachers giving them feedback. And just to give you a quick example, this one young lady took 8th grade, took her personal journey through her parents' divorce, which had just finished about a year ago. And it sounded almost cliche, but took the causes of the Revolutionary War and the sides that were there, and related it to her personal journey through this, and what her and her brother went through. And what it started, like the teacher would say things like, well, how would, say, your parents' friends relate to that? She was just giving probes, just little ideas. And then the student would go back into the Civil War and start thinking, really looking at the Civil War with these, how does this inform my relationship? Because what we want to, the reason we study history is to inform our present and our future decisions. And so here's this young lady who's learning about the Civil War, applying it to something that's really relevant to her right now, very, very relevant to her right now. And the teacher even said, this paper has to be between just you and me. I just want you to know, this is a private journey that she's taking. But I guarantee you, 10 years from now, if you ask that girl what the cause of the Revolutionary or the Civil War were, or what she's still going to know that. Because it was very personally connected to her. And it was all open note. It was all open internet, open friend, open everything. It was a totally different type of assessment, but beautifully done.
That's a perfect example. It's interesting. I was thinking, in one place you sort of said, and the teacher had kind of found all these resources, so they had those resources there. And I think, one of the things in schools is that teachers have to do all the work. And so in that context, you actually have the students find this and create this set of materials for each other and for their work as they go. So it's, again, kind of flipping how teachers think about their work. And when you put these tools in the hands of students can do much more of the work than they do now. They don't have to kind of sit around waiting for the teacher to tell them what to do next. They can continuously kind of move along, and in some of the kind of waiting spaces of school, they can kind of fill in with some of the things available.
I'm almost overwhelmed by how interesting you all are. I mean, it makes me want to go back to school. It sounds like it would be so interesting, and yet more and more kids are not completing school. And we have a broad goal of more kids going to college. So what's inhibiting the excitement that I feel from the three of you at the local, state, national levels, and what's actually happening?
I think it's engagement. We talked earlier about what I feel is one of our shining stars in Manor. That's our student newspaper, student news magazine. And what we see is, we see so many kids that really haven't found a niche yet. They just don't know what to do with their lives. And so they stumble into a journalism course, and now they're writing for an authentic audience. They're writing for a worldwide audience. And they're on fire. I mean, these are students you would never think would be interested in writing. So I think it's really, Ken Robinson talks about this, about finding something that puts you into your element. And I think that, more than anything else, is what's critical. I mean, good teachers, we know the best teachers we've had help us find our own element. And I think that's the key. Technology can act as a catalyst to that, but it still doesn't solve the initial problem. It's a human resources problem. We need good people.
You got the state. That was a little,
Was that
I guess.
Sure. Okay.
Well, I would look there. The engagement thing is,
The barriers are huge.
the engagement piece is critical. And the thing that we have to recognize is that technology allows us to individually engage students. In the past, we really didn't have that option. By the way, I think we would all agree, we're not slamming the way education has been done in the past. These opportunities are available now, now. These things are just coming about as we speak. This is not an indictment on the way we educated people during the 50s and the 60s. I mean, we got to the moon with that type of push. I mean, the opportunity is that the technology is involved to allow us now to fundamentally individualize instruction in a way that has never been possible, and scaffold barriers that have never been able to be scaffolded before. When we now have kids with autism, for the first time in their life, they are communicating with their parents. Instead of being locked in a room and watching children's cartoons all day, which had to be like a default thing we did in the past, these students are now contributing to the fabric of the school. If you ever met Carly's voice, she's a young lady with autism who's now going to college. She has a blog, she Twitters, she's amazing. And for the first 14 years of her life, she was completely non-communicative because she had no way to talk. The first thing she started talking about when she got a device in front of her that could allow her to communicate was, "My skin feels like it's on fire." And that's why they realized her daughter was throwing herself into the wall all the time, because she had this physical pain that she wasn't able to express. And now she talks about, she wants on her parents just can't believe the change. And all of this was all based on a piece of technology that allowed her to communicate. But that same type of revolution can happen in very small ways. It's just a kid that doesn't like math, doesn't like English, doesn't like school. And we can start to engage kids differently.
What he said, the opportunity is immense. There are tremendous barriers, but they're not insurmountable. What I mentioned is like moving from kind of free-floating anxiety and free-floating well, that all sounds really hard and complex, to okay, let's name it, let's build it, broadband to the community, broadband to the school network, devices in the hands of all students, content, let's analyze content, what's the best content for these devices, what are the assessments that can be on these devices. Now let's think about people, and I'm not saying this is all in order, but just sort of starting to take it apart and think of the various elements. How do we engage people? How do we engage teachers about thinking of different kinds of assignments? How do we help teachers connect with each other and talk to each other and design together? How do leaders think about how they communicate effectively with the community and with parent groups and with their teachers and with the students, so that everybody is kind of working towards this shared goal of getting more students over a higher bar. So there are a lot of sort of layers to this sort of ecosystem, but it does come down to access. And if we keep talking about it, but the technology is sort of either only in the kids' homes whose parents are wealthy enough to provide it for them, and then at school it's down the hall in a lab or it wheels in every once in a while or whatever, it's not where we need to get to. We need to figure out how to responsibly and carefully put the devices in the hands of students so that we can leapfrog all of this other stuff and get to the point where we are seeing these kinds of things that we've seen in small pockets of possible.
So that kind of leads me to this, you all kind of raised the issue of risk versus rewards. And there was a question about budget or cost versus capacity or current environment. So how do we balance the risk and reward? Or how do we make it more accessible? Because the concept that technology is opportunity is really quite universal and quite, I mean, it makes one believe that there are solutions and that they're readily available. So now how do we balance the risk and reward of cost, et cetera?
So the question is, how do we pay for it? I mean, that's really the fundamental key. I think we talked a little bit earlier about low-cost devices, and I think honestly, projecting out, looking out, this is where we need to be. iPad just reduced in price. Low-cost, Linux-based computers. Now, think about what your Kindle can do, what your Nook can do. I mean, these are incredibly powerful, very low-cost devices. I think as technology changes, I think as the industry evolves, we'll continue to see downward pressure on price. But that's critical, being able to afford this. I mean, obviously that's a huge piece of the equation.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, I can certainly elaborate on that. Very excited about this. Just to talk a bit more about that. Literally, we now have the ability to potentially purchase mini computers and put them in the hands of every student. At $35, we're into a completely different class of electronics. This is well under what you would see in a tablet device, your typical netbook. I mean, this is a fundamental game changer. And I think what's very important about that is by putting the low-cost devices in the hands of students, whatever it may be, I believe, that we can reinvent STEM. We can actually get kids programming again. And that's kind of taking a divergence here, but that's something I'm very interested in because often we have devices that are handed to kids and they're kind of prefab, finished devices that sort of prevents us from really getting into the guts of that technology. And I think to incite some of these revolutions, we have to kind of instill a love of programming and engineering and development.
I would jump on the financial thing too, as well as there are, in addition to lower cost devices, we have a lot of sacred elements in schools that need to be sacrificed or need to be re-examined. We do things in school, like there are things, huge chunks of our budget that can be looked at in terms of things like textbooks, consumable materials. The way we do professional development, as you had mentioned, we spend a lot of money on professional development that might not necessarily be giving us all the bang for the buck. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge professional development fan. But look at some of the PD budgets that we have and the way we do teaching certification and recertification. There's a lot of money in the system that's current paper, printing, warehousing, copies of contracts, printer contracts. When I was a technology coordinator, that's a lot of money just to warehouse paper, just to store the stuff, not to even use it. There are a lot of things we can start to rethink. It doesn't have to be, how do I add this device to an already strapped budget? Even things like the days, periods, how we structure our school are starting to be re-examined in certain places where, does every child have to be in school from this particular time to this particular time, following this weird grid that was invented in 1905? Or is there a way we might be able to allow some students different access points? Should we be off summer? Should we be lengthening the school day or shortening the school day or changing the school day? Changing when kids can graduate. Do some kids graduate in 3 years? Some kids graduate in 5 years? We have a lot of things we just take for granted, like the brick and mortar elements of the building. There's a lot of things we just sort of assume are part of school.
But John, that's the way we've always done it.
Exactly. We have tools that can really free some of this conversation. I mean, imagine having a student who was taking this heavy content class, maybe like an AP psychology class. It's usually an incredibly difficult class to schedule because every kid that's in AP psych also wants to be in band and chorus and orchestra and AP physics. So this little singleton is hard to schedule. But if that student can consume most of that coursework outside of the traditional schedule and come to class 2 or 3 days a week, that's an incredibly less financial burden on the school district. Lots of different things like that.
And thinking about the notion of when we have these kind of maps, one of the policy issues that's sort of a big issue right now, and it's mostly at state levels, is the switch from seat time, so measuring how much time someone spends to get their credit, to a competency-based model, right? So for example, for students in algebra, if they can finish by February, that we should think that's a good thing. Now, most people say, well, what the heck do we do with them then, So there are things to figure out. But again, if we can start moving to a flow of mathematics rather than a chunking it up by time, we can kind of move to a better model. There's just on the cost thing. Dr. Mark Edwards, who's superintendent of Mooresville School District, you probably heard the New York Times story about Mooresville and that kind of thing. They spend $225 per year per student on the technology, the professional development, and the content. So basically everything except for like the infrastructure, which is sort of built in place. And that's with a full-fledged laptop computer, right? So the model's a few years old. And as we move to kind of lower cost, netbooks, Chromebooks, tablets, whatever the kinds of things that we come up with, new devices that are lower cost and high powered, so that students are relegated to really bad, not powerful computers. That number is going to come down. So it's going to become affordable. I think we need systems thinking on this, right? So if some students have the same exact thing at home because their parents bought it for them, the school should figure out how to leverage those instead of also bringing them in from the school side, right? Same thing with data plans, for example. Some kids have it already at home, so maybe a data plan can be shared amongst kids who do not have access at home. So there's a whole bunch of kind of systems things to work on and figure out, this is doable. We've been really working hard to get technology integrated across everything rather than being a separate silo over here. The way it's been funded in the past, the way we've thought about it is like, that's the technology stuff. We put technology teachers in schools so that the teachers sort of are, don't necessarily have to figure it out because they can work with the technology teacher. We've done a lot of things to kind of segment it and separate it. We're at the point now of fully bringing it in and just having it there to support the teaching and learning every day.
With that, I'm going to say thank you very much because only a few questions. This has been a message of hope, and now we're going to hear some local examples.
No, I'll tell you. Thank you three again so much. Wow, now a few mandate changes and we can get on with making some real changes in this state. Stepping in to introduce the Lancaster County Superintendents is a behind-the-scenes catalyst and counsel for much of what's come together tonight. From our past financial forum to the trip to the Department of Education I referenced earlier, she has been there for hourglass. Please welcome the Executive Director of one of the most notable education service organizations in the state, our own IU 13, Dr. Cynthia Burkhardt.
Thanks, Sid, and thank you to the Hourglass. We are on the home stretch. We're hanging in there, although it has not been difficult to really stay on the edge of our seats. How many of you were able to be at IU 13's legislative breakfast on Monday? So many of you, and maybe you'll remember this. For those of you that were not there, every year we hold our annual legislative breakfast, whereby 22 school boards attend, along with legislators and our school leaders. We have about 200 people. And we have a panel of legislators. One of the questions that was asked of the legislative panel was, why do you think there is such a negative perception of public education coming from Harrisburg? And the response from one of the legislators was this. He basically said, students need access to digital environments and our public schools need to provide those. And I couldn't help as I looked out over the audience at the school leaders. They were either looking at each other or looking at me, sort of smiling, saying, this guy doesn't understand that we have these opportunities that are happening in our schools today. And I had a few superintendents see me after the event to say, they just don't get it. And as I thought about that, I thought to myself, no, we're just not very good at bragging about what we do. We're not very good at promoting the good things that are happening in our schools. We haven't had to do that. We're not used to it. We don't have a budget for it. So I'd like to just extend a hearty welcome to Hourglass for providing an opportunity whereby some of our local leaders can share with you some of the innovations that they have adapted and really wrap their arms around. But in addition to the three that you're going to hear about tonight, for those of you that may not know this, we have some really great things happening in our schools in Lancaster and Lebanon counties. Tiny little Pequot Valley, located in rural Pennsylvania, has a laptop for every high school student, iPads coming to the intermediate level this next year. But again, it's not about the technology. It's about the innovative classrooms that are now being held in those environments in rural Pennsylvania where kids are engaged in project-based learning. Those environments are changing. They somehow have found the dollars to make it happen. At IU13, we saw a great need for many of our school environments to have access to virtual solutions. How can they compete with cyber schools to keep the dollars at home? So they now have access through IU13, and 11 districts access it, where students can access over 700 courses, and those courses are growing very, very quickly. The hybrid learning project that we're now engaged in, where 6 of our local school districts are really aggressively going after assessing their environments and figuring out a way to have blended learning environments come into their school districts. And last but not least, I couldn't help but think about one of the examples that was used tonight. Just a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we at IU13 served many children with special needs. And we were talking about one day, we were talking about an Amish family who had a set of twins who had never been verbal, had never spoken, and they were in our classrooms. And at age 20 years old, they got access to assistive technology. And at our board meeting, and maybe some of you were here tonight where you had a chance to see this, we had an Amish father come in, wheeled in his 2 children, they were twins, both quadriplegic, had never spoken a word to their father, and at age 19 years old, for the first time, spoke through assistive technology. There was not a dry eye in the place. But not only were these kids speaking to their dad, but they were actually writing articles for the local newspaper. So the power of technology is here, it's here to stay, and now I would like to introduce 3 of our superintendents who really we're very, very proud of, and we want to thank for joining us. We have Dr. Mike Licklider from Penn Manor, Dr. Hollister from Malenko, and Dr. Hudax from Solanco. So Mike, would you please join me? Please welcome him.
And I'm going to take a cue from Karen and have Charlie help me set up my presentations. And I want to recognize my other 2 colleagues, Dr. Jean Freeman, who's in the back from Manhattan Township, as well as Dr. Brenda Becker from Hempfield. And I'm really talking about a collaboration between 3 districts. And we've heard it said a number of times tonight, it's not about the technology. The technology is just simply the tool, just like the radio, television, but it's a technology that helps us to move into the future of where we need to be as schools, as communities, and as a nation. And the story I'm going to tell you about is more about transformation, but also about relationships between 3 school boards, 3 school districts, and 3 superintendents. And I also want to take a moment, as Cindy did, to thank the Hourglass Foundation. I also want to recognize Monty Milner and Sid Marlin for all their help over the last 2 years, because the conversations generated from last year's forum and what I'm hoping is generated from this year's forum really helps to raise the level of conversation in our community. 87% of our students across Pennsylvania are educated in public schools, and we can't afford to let what happened to Kodak happen to our public schools. And to rewind 1 year ago, our colleague who retired from Lampeter Strasburg, Dr. Bob Frick, he, at the very end of at the presentation last year, he delivered a eulogy for public education. And in it, and I'll quote because it was just very striking, those of you who were here can also attest to that. He said, in 2010, public education was put on life support, with the only remaining question being whether he would pass away before his detractors, those public servants responsible for his care, pulled the plug. So what's happened in the last year? What has happened in public education? What's happened in Lancaster schools? Have we let that happen? I, for one, am here to suggest that no, we have not. In fact, we've gone the opposite direction. And as I reflected on that eulogy for public education, I was reminded of someone who I enjoyed reading as a high school student, Mark Twain, saying, "The rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated." And I believe the rumors of public education's demise are the same. And I'm here to suggest that the partnership between Manham Township, Hempfield, and Penn Manor is just one of many examples across Lancaster and Lebanon counties, across the state, and across our whole country. And I want to talk to you a little bit about our partnership, what we're trying to do, emphasizing the relationships. And since we have Karen Cater from the United States Department of Education, the Obama administration, and we also have John Landis from Apple Computer, I thought a story that would converge the two would be appropriate. I enjoy reading the New York Times, I enjoy the Sunday Times, and about 2 months ago in the Sunday Times there was an excellent article. And the article was entitled, "How the U.S. Lost the iPhone Market." And in the article they tell the story about President Obama inviting top business leaders from across the country. And he invited them in to talk to him and ask him a question. It was about a year before Steve Jobs passed away. And he broke the rule. The president broke the rule for Steve Jobs. And in that conversation of how we can reinvigorate manufacturing in this country, he asked a simple question. And the question he asked to Steve Jobs is, how can we bring those jobs back to the United States? And Steve Jobs gave a very unequivocal answer, and his answer was simple few words. Those jobs aren't coming back. It's not happening. The article went on to talk about many of the reasons why it's not happening. But those jobs, and how many of you have purchased an iPhone and ordered it online, or an iPad, or any other Apple product? I think those of us who are at leadership, we have this little piece of control about us that we like to know where things are. So whenever I order a product, I like to track it online and track FedEx. And the first time I ordered, I believe it was my son's iPod Touch, I tracked it and I was amazed to see that it left the FedEx facility in Shanghai, China. All the products are manufactured overseas. So the question for those of us who are in education, those of us who are in business, are not how we can bring those jobs to the United States, but how we can transform what we do to make our economy better and to recognize that it's really a global economy. And I take that back to the eulogy for public education. If we're in the same place 10 years ago that we are today, shame on us. So how did we do this? And I'm going to go back to, it's amazing the similarities between the speakers tonight. I'm going to use the whitewater analogy for just a moment. I don't believe that we're going to ever experience the same situation, the same level of funding that we had in the past. So the way in whitewater, constant whitewater, to get through it is to get together in the boat with all the oars in the water pulling in the same direction. And that's the example that Hempfield, Penn Manor, Manham Township came out of this circumstance with. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you about how our Open Campus Pennsylvania project is transforming what we're doing in schools. We, as 3 school districts, have come together with an idea. How can we work cooperatively to advance our goals at a time when education funding is cut, when we're forced to cut significant programs, significant jobs? I think you saw the example. I use one of our neighbors, Manham Township, one of our partners. With their early retirement incentive, they have 25 jobs that they are looking how many of those jobs we can eliminate next year. We cannot continue to do that and function as effectively as we are right now unless we work together to make sure that we provide not just the same opportunities, but enhanced opportunities and different opportunities for our students. So this really is about relationships, about how do you work together to achieve the same goal. Those examples are just plentiful in this IU. Cindy's talked about many of the examples. I think we have probably one of the most successful IUs in the state, and that's told to us by people outside of this region because we all work together on a regular basis as a large group, as small groups. How did we come up with the 3 districts? We have 3 districts that border the north, west, and southern end of Lancaster City, and we are contiguous districts. We are the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th largest districts in the county with about 18,000 students. We have excellent teachers, excellent administrators, an extremely supportive school board in each of the districts who don't want to cut jobs, who don't want to cut programs, but want to give more to the kids in our communities. So that was the genesis. We also have 3 strong districts as far as technology goes. And I think you've seen one of the examples of one of the 3 tech directors, but I can tell you the other 2 people from the other districts are equally as amazing and are creative in how they think about the future and think about what we do in education. So the 3 of us have come together to come up with an idea. How can we develop and share our resources? And how can we use technology? This story isn't about online classes. It's about the collaboration that is occurring. We're currently developing 12 classes at our high school level for juniors and seniors next year that are going to be offered in all 3 districts. They're going to be the identical courses taught by teachers in Penn Manor. Maybe some students in Penn Manor will be taking courses from a teacher in Manor Township. Maybe some students in Hempfield will be taking courses from a teacher in Penn Manor. We're not sure how many students from each district are going to be involved, but we have 3 courses. Let me give you a couple of examples of how it's transforming education. My wife's an English teacher by training. Anybody here English teachers? I want to make sure. Okay, there's probably at least 2 people here I'm going to offend. But if you know English teachers, you know they love books. And they especially love the books they teach in their class. Part of our program is sitting all of our teachers down to develop courses and transform what they're doing. At the beginning of the process, we said you can't take what you're teaching in your English class right now, simply transform it digitally, put it online, and expect students to perform the same identical thing. There has to be something different about it. The first example I'll give you 3 examples. The first example is English. We sat down with the teachers. After the first day, we had more angst than agreement. So at the beginning of the second day, we sat down. My friend Brenda Becker put on her teacher mode and stood up at the blackboard and said to the teachers, okay, what's the problem? Why can't we develop a common course? Well, I want to teach Beowulf, and at Penn Manor they teach Shakespeare, and over at Manor Township they teach this content. And by the end of about an hour session, Brenda and the others in the room were able to transform the conversation from not what we teach, but what concepts we teach. What do we want students to learn when they're walking out of the classroom? By the end of that day, the teachers were relieved. They were actually happy. They had been working so hard to put what they're doing in a structure that could allow multiple kinds of literature to be used. Second example I'll give from that same day is math. Again, 3 teachers from 3 different school districts. Math is a little more sequential. Math, they were able to come to agreement on what are the concepts. In fact, one of the benefits from this is we learned how similar the curriculums in each district are to each other. But the problem that day came down to textbooks. What textbook are we going to use, and how are we going to get students the textbook? Do we bring them in for a big session in August? How are we going to deliver the textbook? And which one can we use, and can we actually do that? So Brenda, Jean, and I said, well, we'd like this math course to be all online, so we'd like you to come up with some ways that you can do it. Why don't you talk to some of the other colleagues? Why don't you talk to some of the people in the science department? Well, lo and behold, to go to what I believe John mentioned about textbooks and the money we spend, they found that there is a California organization that is writing open source textbooks, free math textbooks. And again, this apprehensive group of 3 math teachers, by the end of the day, were so excited because they realized the online textbooks, the open source textbooks that students can use, are exactly the same kinds of contents, units that they need in this calculus course. There's nothing different about it. The only difference is they're free, and we don't have to bring students in to do it. So by the end of the day, they were excited, and then they found out the other exciting thing with the open source textbooks is they can make revisions. They can change the examples. They don't have to stick with what's on page 38 on the odd problems. They can actually transform it and change it. So that was also an exciting feature. But the third example I'll give you is the question that they started confronting. And again, these are 3 teachers from 3 different school districts who prior to that day never met each other. And they are talking, okay, knowing that we have these online tools and that you can go onto a calculator and type in 4 times 4 and find out what the answer is, how are we going to prove in an online course that students know the concepts and can understand and explain the concepts? Lo and behold, one teacher started talking about something called a live scribe pen. Has anybody heard of a live scribe pen? Okay, a live scribe pen is a small pen that has a digital recording component. So if you take it into a traditional mode and talk about a college lecture, you could sit here, you could be taking your notes while this pen is recording. It's a low-cost, relatively inexpensive pen. You can go home that night after a 3-hour lecture that you have recorded on that pen. You can go on your paper, your notebook paper, tap the paper at the line where you have the concept that you may have forgot about. It will re-record, or it will replay that segment of the lecture maybe in the middle of the class so that the student can remember. Well, this can also be transformed so that if a student is sitting at home working on the book, all they have to do is start talking. They can create their problem, 4 times 4 equals 16, or whatever the problem is. It's much more complicated than that. But unlike John, I'm not a very good mathematician. I was a history major. I had that mindset at the time. But they can explain, as they're writing out the problem, transform it to a PDF file with voice, and upload it to the site that we're going to use, an open source site. So they can explain. So it's not just simple regurgitation. It's actually taking that to one step further, using the concepts to explain to the teacher who's at a different location, at a different time, looking at this not simultaneously. So these are just 3 examples of how it's transforming education. Another example I want to give to say how it's going to transform education and work for us is in the area of the subjects that we offer. And I had to use this. I was not a Latin student. We still have some students who are interested in that course. The problem is budget cuts and the fact that it's not a high popularity course. We can't afford to have a Latin teacher in Penn Manor, a Latin teacher in Manheim Township, and a Latin teacher in Hempfield. Manheim Township caught their Latin teacher. Last year we had our last teacher who had Latin certification retire. But I still have a number of students who are interested in this concept. Now, I pulled up the visual of the dollar bill. I didn't understand what Inuit coitus actually meant, so I had to look that up. I Googled it and found it instantly as opposed to the old days. But we do have students who are very interested in this. Research tells us that Latin is an excellent subject. It helps with critical thinking skills. It helps with certain professions. So, of the 3 districts, the only district with a Latin teacher is Hempfield. We'll be able to offer in Penn Manor and Manheim Township Latin to students, have them take it virtually, be able to save money on our end from not replacing those teachers. And I just use this as a simple example that we hope will increase manyfold as we go further down the road of the development in our Open Campus Pennsylvania project. It's about relationships. And in an age where we heard that the state has pretty much abdicated the responsibility, saying we can't continue to fund you. We need to work together as 3 different districts. Gene Freeman's the one who is, one of his favorite pieces about this is he's from North Carolina, where you have county systems. And Gene has said this is consolidation while being able to maintain our own local control, which is important in Pennsylvania, as well as our own individual identities, our sports teams, everything else that makes each of our districts in this region and across the state unique. One of the other relationships we developed is through the development. This is not an idea that was hatched in a boardroom somewhere and that's being unfolded. We have worked on a regular basis. We meet about every 3 weeks with a team that includes not only the superintendents and the tech directors and the principals, but teachers, leaders of our associations, and the PSEA, the local representative for Lancaster County from PSEA. PSEA, the association, has been extremely supportive of the endeavor. Our association members have been extremely supportive as well, because one of the concepts we've talked about is maybe a teacher doesn't need to be in their classroom from 7:30 to 9 o'clock when they would traditionally be teaching this class. That they could actually be home and do the work in the evening. Well, that goes against the union contract. But our associations and PSEA have not put up any barriers. In fact, they have been helpful and generated ideas for us. The same with state leaders, that we're actually getting support for this because we're looking different. Secretary Ron Tabas, Senator Smucker, Senator Piccola, Representative Allman, Cutler, Boyd, Baird, they have all worked with us to make sure the barriers are not there. So it is a story about relationships, about cooperation, and about moving forward. And as we move forward in the next few years, we need to be more creative, and we need to look for additional ways to break down the barriers in each of our 22 districts in the Lancaster-Lebanon IU, and work together to make sure that moving forward, we continue to take advantage of the open source technology and other products that are out to be the tool to generate some of the change. So I thank you very much. And at this point, Dr. Hudax from Slanker.
Good evening. My name is Marty Hudax. I'm the superintendent of Lancaster School District. We are indeed facing economic and political challenges on the local, state, and federal level. As we face and conquer these challenges, we cannot afford to lose sight of the fact that the core business of public education is to educate our students. It is to give our students the knowledge and the skills they need to find success and fulfillment once they graduate our schools. We sometimes get caught up in the rhetoric of finances and politics and talk as if it's all about the money. But we must be fiscally responsible. We can't lose sight of our priority, our students. It's not enough to save money in this new economic reality. Rather, we must improve our performance, examine our efficiencies, and collaborate with others. This enables us to reinvest our very limited resources into our students. The successful response to this challenge will not be found in isolated initiatives or a cost-cutting list, but rather in a systemic approach that builds on one good decision made after another. Tonight, we're hearing about initiatives that are bold and creative. These are initiatives that require collaboration, innovation, and vision. And although they are being presented as singular ideas, they are not created or built in a vacuum. I'm going to take a slightly different approach as I share Solanco's story. I'm going to frame it in the context of systemic change that encourages creative ideas and effective redirection of resources to the students. This story will feature innovations, capacity building, accountability, flexibility, and improved efficiency in our operations. The short video I'm about to show tells our story, starting in 2004 when we put our entire high school staff through the Classrooms for the Future professional development and integrated technology into all of our classrooms. As a result, our teachers are ready to embrace online and blended curriculum. That attitude opened the door for our successful Sniper Virtual Academy, which expanded to our virtual summer school, which led to the development of blended courses, where instruction is done online, and students will occasionally come into the classes in flexible groups with the teachers choosing to have project-based activities. We saw the need for accountability through data analysis and innovation through data-driven decision-making. Our staff and administrators became adept at using technology to collect and to analyze the data. We saw that the data analysis helped us not only support outstanding student achievement, but it also enabled us to measure the efficiency of our non-instructional operations. So using innovation, improving efficiencies, and examining effectiveness have enabled us to use our financial and human resources to focus on our core business. As an example, Sniper Virtual Academy, the online courses that we have enable us to deal with students as individuals. We have a student, I'll give you an example. We have a student who wants to be a vet. She has a horse farm. She gets up at 4 in the morning and she works with the horses. She cleans, takes care of the horses. Then she has to wait 90 minutes for the bus to come and pick her up. Sniper's a big district, 180 square miles. The ride is 45 minutes for her to get to school. From the time the bus arrives to the time that her first period begins is another 25 minutes. What you have is a 2.5-hour drop, lots of time there from when she finishes the chores to when the classes actually begin. She does a whole day of classes. By the time she gets home, it's 4:30. Then she does her chores, has to do her homework, and then she's ready to start again the next day. We're able to put her on an online through the SBA, an online course. So when she finishes her chores, she's ready to start classes. And in fact, in the 2.5 hours that she before had been wasting, she's now able to get several courses out of the way, to the point where she's also able to work part-time on some afternoons at a local veterinarian clinic. Okay, this has given her the experience that, and she's also, by the way, through this, been able to accelerate her credit count where she's going to graduate a semester early, with the idea being that she'll be able to work for that semester before she heads out to college to see her dream for veterinary school. A traditional schedule would not work for her. A flexible schedule did. Without the ability of the technology, the online, without the vision, without the innovation, we were stuck. Another example, we have 2 very, very bright students. Their father had planned for years to take them to his homeland in Vietnam. The trip over was going to take 6 to 8 weeks. In our traditional manner, there was no way that we were going to be able to accommodate these 2 kids. One was a senior. But we were able to use the SBA, the online courses. The students had, via the web, access to these courses while they were in Vietnam, stayed on top of their courses. When they came back, they were right in step with the class. The girl graduated in the top 25 of her class. The boy graduated a year later in a similar situation. The opportunity that we had, the flexibility that offered through the innovations, allowed us to be individualized in the way that we approach our core business, and that's working with students. So with that framework, I'd like to show you this Lanco story. music was free. The question Susan asked before about, where to get the funding. We say, kind of what we're explaining here, through the efficiencies, through the innovations, through the use of technology, examining what we did, we saved over $1 million in operating costs that we were able then to invest in our own money. The $750,000 that we would have been paying to cyber schools, we had to invest quite a bit of that to get our Lancaster Virtual Academy working, but that money came back into our own district for materials that we're using with the kids that are in our brick and mortar as well as in our virtual school. So the money is there, and it is in the efficiency of operation. There's no doubt that we're facing economic challenges, but as Mike said, I would like to echo, I'm proud to be among the 22 superintendents that are here in IU13, along with Cindy, who is the executive director for IU13, because they're tremendously collaborative, and more importantly, in this time of challenges and problems, they're tremendous problem solvers. We're at a point where we have to deal with challenges all the time. But we're also at a point where we are reshaping education. I got to tell you, that's an exhausting but an exhilarating place to be. And I think what you're going to see tonight is that we've got the horses in the stable to make those changes. And I thank you for this time to talk. Thank you.
If I give you 30 seconds to stand up, you're not going to walk out on me, are you? Why don't you just take a little stretch? A storm brings energy, and if we can harness that energy and use it productively with purpose, then I think we've gained something. When I met with Sid, we talked about the process. Sid said, Bob, try to set the stage a little bit, try and go back to how you were thinking a year or two ago and bring us forward. So in terms of where we were thinking a year ago, in fact, this statement is the statement I made to my administrative team back in the fall of 2010, when we knew we were headed into some rough water. The wind was picking up, so to speak. I also made the same statement to our board members. The risk in making a statement like this is it's eventually used against you, as it was with my cabinet members who, when I started getting cold feet about some of the things that we needed to do and had to do, they propped me up and sort of used this against me. The other thing about the statement that Sid and I talked about was the word crisis being over. And after we processed a little bit, Sid's concern was we don't want to send a message that the crisis is over or will be over soon. And after we talked about it, we agreed that what I really intend here is what he means as well, is that there's a permanent new order. And once the new normal is accepted, then that's sort of what we're referring to with the crisis being over. The new normal is going to be very different. It's going to be that permanent whitewater that Charlie mentioned and that I believe Mike mentioned as well. So with this mindset became a mantra for us at Eastern Lancaster County. And we proceeded with that in mind. So again, the first piece is recognizing the storm, accepting it, developing a mantra that says, okay, here's going to be our drumbeat. And then what we did is we broke it down strategically. What are the things that we had to do to do a better job for kids and also survive what was a perfect storm? For anyone who doesn't recognize, that's the wave from the movie with George Clooney and The Perfect Storm. I sort of liberated a clip from the internet. But it's not just, and I think it's important to say, it's not just economics. I think even before the economic crisis hit, the superintendent in this county felt the urgency related to the global economy that we have and all of the things that go along with the global economy and where our kids are going to need to operate, not in the future, but where our kids need to operate right now. And so the perfect storm was a little bit of everything. It was the economy, it was politics that we know about, but it was also increased accountability for everyone, our teachers, ourselves, as well as this urgency related to the global economy that is a very different situation. So from this then goes, okay, so if we know our we know what we have, then what are we going to do? Well, we reshape. Reshaping is a part of what has to happen, and a part of reshaping is cutting. And I hate to say that, but it is a fact. We did some cutting. We blew up the middle school schedule, redesigned it completely to better serve kids. We did some other reshaping kinds of things, like we are now deciding what students go in our honors courses. In the past, honors courses were always chosen by families and students. We take data and we say you're qualified to be in honors classes, you're in the honors class. Now, there's been some pushback from parents and from teachers on that, but we feel that if the kid's qualified to be in honors classes, that's where they should be. So little things like that, we did some adjusting, some restructuring, reshaping. Tonight, what I'm going to spend my precious minutes on with you is the innovation piece, and then we'll finish up a little bit with the marketing. So, with all that background, what should education look like? What should the full spectrum of learning look like? Well, this is a model that we just made up. It's nothing special about it, other than it identifies in my mind what the full continuum of what we do in public education should be, and what we are doing here in this county. It's not just, this is not my clicker, it's not just traditional skills, the PSSA test. Very important. PSSA measures important things, but it's not the end all, as we know. And so I think if we're doing a balanced system of learning, there are other major components that go into that. Now, one of the frustrations that's always been is, well, how do you measure all those other important concepts and qualities? Well, I'm happy to report that we have, our first sort of innovation is an actual measure that allows us to measure global competency skills. Wow, is that really cool? Take a look at some of the things here. John, how trouble Charlie's clicker or his laser. Who wouldn't want their students to have those skill sets? Who wouldn't want their own children, I have 2 young children, to learn those skill sets in our public schools? Who themselves, regardless of the business you're in, wouldn't want to be good at some of those skill sets? The way we use the GCAA, we've tinkered around with it the last couple of years. Presently, we're using it in our World Studies class. Students take this assessment, they take it online, they get instantaneous feedback. No, that's on off the slide. Let me talk a little bit about the model and get back to how we use it. The skills that are measured by the GCAA fall into 8 categories. The way it works is you start here, and the optimal learning is on the outer ring. The instrument is broken into 2 major components, an internal readiness and an external readiness. The students get individual scores in each of those areas there. The idea being that until you're self-aware, you can't really be globally competent. So going back to earlier when we talked about, and it was a board member from Lancaster who tried to challenge our guest from Washington on what skills and how skills can be measured beyond the PSSA. This is one of those ways, and I'll show you in a second what that looks like. But the students get quantifiable measures on these particular skill sets, and on top of that, they get references. Once they take the exam, they get instantaneous feedback. Technology lets us do that. And they get citations, references to use to further develop their scores. The way we're using it presently as an activity is the students get the GCAA in different classes. And then that is used as a reference throughout the semester. We're in a block scheduling. So for the semester, the students refer back to their test scores, and they analyze themselves and the projects they're doing relative to that baseline data that they collected. A couple of years ago, we did a sort of an impromptu research project. We have Model UN in our school, in our high school, and we had the students take, in this particular time, it was the global issues classes where we're sort of piloting the GCAA, and we actually measured the students' progress who went to the Model U experience. If you've never done that, it's up in New York City. It's an amazing experience for kids. We measured their progress compared to the students in the Global Issues class. What's nice about this product is that they do give you an analysis, not only at the individual student level, but they also analyze it for curriculum production, et cetera. And one of the findings was that, in fact, the Model UN students learned significantly more about their global competencies because of their experience in the Model UN. We did a pre-test, post-test. So this is one example of ways that we can quantify some of those skills that we have always sort of fell into or learned accidentally. Our second innovation that we've been working with, this is new this year, is a concept called Physics First. 2 summers ago, we sent 6 teachers volunteered to participate in a learning experience called modeling. 3 physics, 3 chemistry teachers. They participated in this experience, learning how to teach science in a very, very different way. John Magnus referred to earlier, sort of allowing kids to discover and not give the answer. One of the number one ways that our science teachers respond to kids when they have questions in these classes is with more questions. Drives the kids crazy, but it also drives them to learn. What this concept does is it takes the traditional science sequence that probably most of us had and inverts it. Urban legend says that the reason that these classes were chosen and picked this way, 9th grade biology, 10th grade chemistry, 11th grade physics, was because they're alphabetical. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is true, I'm glad we're finally doing something about it. When you take a look at this, it's very interesting to see what happens here in this window on the next slide. Physics should be the base course. Physics informs chemistry and biology at extremely high percentages, as you can see. What we're finding, much to our surprise, this is first year, so the data is anecdotal mostly, but we do have some concrete quantifiable data as well. Our 9th grade students, because of the way the science teachers are teaching it, the science teachers, probably with most of us, for those of us who took physics, we probably started with, here's a formula, plug in the numbers, try and prove the experiment, try and prove it. What this does is it flips it completely around, and it says, we want to prove something, how are you going to do it? Please give me the formula. So when the physics teacher's finished, the answer that the kids must come up with is the formula, as opposed to getting the formula and trying to prove the formula. Opposite. Bang! This is really cool stuff. Our 9th grade students are scoring equally or better than the current 11th grade students in physics, keeping in mind that our physics students in 11th grade are self-selected, probably college-bound students, and are probably the more highly motivated because they chose to take physics. And our 9th grade full class is competing with them because of the way we're doing it. That's really cool stuff. As a side benefit, our language arts teachers, our mathematics teachers, back to John's point, because we're teaching the abstract pieces with manipulatives, literally, they're actually getting math quicker, according to the math teachers as well. Because the abstract concepts are filling in better because of the physics experience. So we have a side benefit. The final innovation that we're going to share again is akin to a lot of the things that we spoke about this evening. And I'm very proud of the team of teachers and administrators that put this together. 1 year ago this month, we didn't have a plan for an online venue. One thing that's that all public schools are getting a lot better at is being more agile and quicker to respond. I think that's a plus for all of us, and it's true in this town especially. We have two major components to our online learning venue. We have the piece that we're really trying to recapture our cyber school kids. At Elanco, it's a financial issue as much as it is an educational issue. At Elanco, we're having to budget nearly $1 million in cash to cover our cyber school costs. We're recovering a lot of that through our Elanco Online. The other option that we have, and it's something a little bit different, is we've also made available the software that we have for our online students, our virtual academy kids, to our seniors. So the Analytica Online has, I think, a number of value-added pieces over what students are experiencing in the PH cyber schools that are out there. First of all, we get a diploma, much like a lot of the other virtual academies that are running, the ones with DIU, Marty's, and some of the others. But one of the major differences, one of the value adds that I believe we have, as well as some other school districts in the county, is the face-to-face piece. At any time, any student in our virtual academy can come into our school. You saw the welcoming sign. We really tried to make it a welcoming cafe. We have high-top tables, and we really sort of did it nice. Can come in and get face-to-face help from a teacher in their discipline, whatever discipline it is. We have teachers scheduled during the day for the virtual online academy kids, the outside kids, to come in and have that face-to-face contact. Not only do we do that, but this is another huge piece. Number 3. We opened up our school completely to those kids. If they want to take a lab, a lecture, they want to sit through one course for 1 week, they have complete control, complete customization over their own schedule. So the virtual academy kids are completely welcome in our school at any level they so choose. We, along with some other schools in this county, could teach any student in the Commonwealth tomorrow. We could sign up today, we could have them in our school tomorrow. So we are going head-to-head with the virtual academy schools and providing a much better product. Testimonials are again, our data is still new, but we've had some sort of individual successes that I think are a tribute to what's happening. Students who can graduate early because they're advanced and moving quickly, and students who probably would have dropped out, but because of the ease, because of the flexibility of what we're able to do, are graduating. Last piece for the Lancaster Online piece. Another sort of side of this, if you remember from a few slides back, is we've now made it available to our seniors. I got to tell you, even before we made cuts and did some restructuring, I couldn't offer any of those classes to my kids. I have an economy of scale issue. We're a fairly small school district, 3,300 students. So I can't give a teacher to teach 3 or 4 students in any of these individual classes. But with our senior option, we have students, 56 students total this year, who took advantage of courses that I couldn't normally offer. They got credit for them. They took them online. Same deal. They were scheduled in one of their 4 blocks, came down to our library. The same teacher who's helping our virtual academy kids is also available there to help our bricks and mortar kids with the classes that they're having, and they're certified in the subjects that those students are wishing to take. So now, not only have I made our learning system more efficient, we've also enhanced what we're able to offer the kids through technology. Stepping out of the innovation, one other piece that again, Sid asked me to mention was the fact that school districts are becoming more entrepreneurial. We are talking about things like niche markets and how do we market, not just public relations, big difference, not just public relations, but marketing our products. And so one of the things that we've done, where the shadows came from, we share our business, we all have business department. Every one of us has a business department. Why shouldn't we say, okay, you guys do payroll for a couple of school districts, we'll do certification for a couple of school districts. We're having those conversations right now with neighboring school districts where we can share our business side of the organization. At Lanco, we have a bus garage that's very close to straddling Peckaway Valley. We literally rent the bus garage for Peckaway Valley buses. So if you would come to our school, or our bus garage, you'd see buses from both school districts being serviced there, fueling up there, etc. So we're sharing that facility. And then finally, one of the big things that we've done in the last couple of years again, because of great leadership in our departments, is we've brought back a lot of our special education programs. 10 years ago, over 300 of our kids in our school system were in external programs of some kind. Presently, only 2.5 of our students go out of our school district for services. That saves us an unbelievable amount of money in fuel costs and any other charges that other programs put on us. We've developed such a strong program, it's not just about dollars, we've developed such a strong program that next year we'll probably bring in about $800,000 in clear revenue after all the bills are paid by sponsoring students from other school districts. In the year, again, those school districts saving money on transportation costs and still getting a quality program because our programs are recognized by PDE. One of our programs is a model site for PDE. There's videos of our kids and our teachers on that site. So we're not just filling rosters, we're actually providing a better product at lesser cost, and we're partnering and collaborating with other school districts to make that work. That's a real quick run through of a lot of things happening in Lanco. The final slide that I have for you, I sort of searched around. I also liberated this from Flickr. It's a picture, you can't see it real well. It's a picture of a sailor on an aircraft carrier, the George Washington, out in the Pacific Ocean. And I thought that this picture stood in great contrast to the first picture of George Clooney's boat about to get wiped out. The new day. You know, the sun is rising. It is rising. It's not going to rise. It will rise. It's rising. It's rising on public education. While there's still clouds sort of around and there's still some haze to work through, it's starting to clear up. And I think it's a new day for public education. The fact that the guys on an aircraft carrier represents sort of a strength and capability and purpose in the ocean, which symbolically is always sort of the place of opportunity and adventure. So I think symbolically this picture works really well, especially in contrast to the other. I'm here to tell you, and full disclosure, I'm a product of private schools, a product of private schools in this town, in fact. But I believe in public education. I believe in public education with my heart and my soul. And I believe public education serves this country well, and as this country gets itself back on its feet, public education will be right there to serve. So on behalf of my colleagues, my superintendent colleagues, I would only say this, if you give us a chance, we'll deliver. Thanks for your time. I appreciate your time today.
Why don't we give our presenters a round of applause? I think we at the Hourglass hope that this, our third form of education, has been informative. Because with the public antipathy, there's a public antipathy toward tax increases, limiting government's willingness to increase school funding, and the rapid increase in pension and medical costs are threatening to overwhelm our school budgets. But we think there is opportunity in this crisis, and I think what we try to portray with this forum tonight is that Lancaster County is well ahead of the curve, and that this problem that we face is going to be solved through innovation and leadership and entrepreneurial efforts to get through this and come out the other side. When you have a crisis, as the saying goes, there is opportunity. And the opportunity to fix the problems here, we are lucky in a way because we have all these different school districts, and every school district's going to experiment in their own way. And from that whole raft of experimentation will come the innovation that we need to come out the other side and adopt the technology needed to survive and have our schools be successful in the future. It is any solution to the problems facing education today will come not from the federal or state governments. They will be local. It will be our burden to carry, our problem to fix, and our opportunity to innovate and lead and ride the wave of change and not have it crash us on the beach and bounce us around. So
it is, there's a saying about where opportunity lies. We know the small circle of what we know. And then outside that circle is what we don't know. But opportunity lies in that area, what we don't know. And that's the area for discovery, and that's what I heard, I think we heard today, where our educators and some of our leaders in these school districts and from Dr. Lance have shown that there is things that we have yet to discover that will get us through this and will lead to an exciting future. So with that, I want to thank, special thanks to everyone, especially Jennifer Mundy, our executive director, who put this together. And with that, thank you all for coming, and thank you, and good night.